Hey guys, relatively short one today. I just want to talk a little bit about two things that I really hate about, I'd say the internet and society in general, and that would be propaganda and censorship. And one thing I really dislike is that people always want to shut down a conversation. They don't want to actually debate certain points, and if someone actually does try to debate them, they'll shut them down pretty quickly. And sometimes people are censored just for existing. For example, um, recently there was that incident where a kid got stabbed at a track meet. And that, I don't remember the name of the victim, but the guy who actually did the stabbing was Carmelo Anthony. One thing that had happened is that the father had started to show up at the press briefings of the family and of the lawyer who were pushing pretty blatant propaganda. They the father wasn't doing anything particularly wrong. He was just showing up and wanted to listen to what was going on and kind of make himself known. He wasn't trying to intimidate in any way whatsoever. In fact, when he was told to leave, he did so without any issues, without any argument, or without any struggle. And the lawyer is trying to make it act like it's completely disrespectful for him to not even show up, despite the fact that it's his son that's the one who passed away. Yeah, I say passed away, but we know that I mean murdered. Whether it's a justifiable homicide or not, well, I would personally say it's an unjustified homicide. But the father's not even saying anything, like, at all. He's not, like, picketing or, like, causing a scene or anything like that. He's just frustrated about the whole process, and who can blame him? I mean, he just lost his son in a horrible, tragic event, and people are donating like tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to his son's murderer. Why? Because apparently being stuck out in the rain or going to your own tent is just too much to ask for a kid in high school. I mean, for God's sakes, I ran cross country. I ran in the rivers, in the mud, rain, sleet. I did some pretty crazy stuff, man. I've been in the military. I have done a lot of stuff in like not very good weather, let's just say. And the fact that this kid thought that he could just stab some dude in the heart because he was too lazy to go over to his own tent. I mean, the kid basically just did it because he felt disrespected. And they're trying to silence the father, even though the father's not even doing anything, really. He's just showing up, and then when they ask him to leave, he leaves. He's not even doing anything. And then they outright lie, too. They're also spreading propaganda. For example, the lawyer has come out and said that he's comparing the situation to Rittenhouse, saying that Kyle Rittenhouse had shot 3 people in the back with an AK, which is not true in the slightest. He had an AR, he was running away, he was being chased down by a guy with a pistol and someone trying to bash his head in with a skateboard. And he only fired when he was forced to the ground and he had no other choice. He shot all 3 of them in the front, and they were the people who were trying to come after him, who were trying to eliminate him, basically. And it's amazing how much that case is really shows just how bad censorship and propaganda is nowadays. And I get my videos here like downgraded in the algorithm because I have been saying, like, I may say something about like the mid-century Germans, for example. Like, I might actually say what their name was, or I might say like what their major symbol was using the actual term for it. And whatever program they have to go through these videos and to actually do a voice the text device to figure out what exactly I am saying to you guys is run through some kind of algorithm, and then my videos have way less reach. And this has been true for a lot of people for a long time. Like, you can't even talk about World War II without being demonetized. Like, even if you don't say anything particularly controversial, or you even, like, you just tell the facts as it is, you can put in a documentary about World War II and frickin' your video will reach nobody whatsoever. YouTube is uh, one of the worst companies to engage in censorship. Like, it is worse than Twitter ever was. And saying that, I mean, at least in terms of reach, because people would be banned all the time from Twitter back in the day, but it's very hard or relatively difficult to get banned from YouTube. But it is pretty easy to get a video demonetized or downgraded in the algorithm by just saying one or two words that the algorithm don't like very much. It's just absolutely ridiculous what it's like. And then you have propaganda from like organizations, say like NPR and PBS, which are funded by taxpayer money. And the whole thing about PBS and NPR was it's supposed to be a non-biased organization that reports on the news funded by the government through our tax dollars. And out of 87 employees that had their party registration public, all 87 of them were Democrats. It's absolutely ridiculous, like, how partisan these organizations are, and it's why we are taking away their funding. Well, not me particularly, not me specifically, but this is why Trump and his cabinet are taking away the funding from these organizations, along with Congress, because they are being controlled by people who have a bias. Now, if an organization was like half Republican, half Democrat, and everyone was totally fine talking about their politics and there was no major issues between people working at an organization, that's one thing. But we have organizations that are completely run by only one party, and then we're expected to think that these guys will not have a subconscious bias against platforming certain individuals or platforming certain ideas or perspectives. It's an absolutely ludicrous supposition that these people are pushing on us, thinking that we're completely stupid and that we can't see the writing on the wall. Like, for instance, you go to Washington, D.C., and it's like the only city in the country that has its own representatives, basically, in Congress. I mean, cities themselves get representatives, but Washington, D.C. is not part of a state. So we can read what their results in the election are without having to go through all the hoops of, like, say, you want to find out, like, how many people voted Democrat in Detroit. Well, it can be pretty easy, it can be pretty difficult, but you have to at least go through a few hoops or a few different search results, maybe to even get to the results. But even like a city like Detroit that might vote like 80% for for Democrats, you have 92% of Washington, D.C. voting for Democrats as well. And it's just absolutely ridiculous how partisan that is. Like, if you were to make Washington, D.C. a state, which is a totally horrible idea, I think it should just be, the majority of the city should just be given back to Maryland, because we already gave back the Virginia part back to Virginia. And I honestly don't understand why Maryland doesn't want to have D.C. back, because it would give them another, like, 2 representatives, basically. I guess they're just concerned that the people voting in D.C. are just so absolutely insane that they'll push even further left-wing policies than even Maryland has, and it would control the entire state, more or less. Because God only knows like what the actual population difference between the two are. I mean, I could look it up very easily, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is that when you have people working in DC and say like the Pentagon or in say Congress working for all these politicians, sure, there might be people from Virginia or Maryland or from surrounding states that come and commute into Washington, D.C., but Virginia is very heavily blue. Not completely so, but a lot of it is blue, and a lot of Maryland is blue, way more than Virginia. So when you have people working in, like, the Pentagon, you can assume that, like, 80 to 90% of people working in there are Democrats, or at least like are more likely to vote Democrat than they are for Republicans. Now, how exactly is that fair when you have people inside an organization as big and as important as the Pentagon? Why should one party have so much control over, like, basically the organization that controls our military and government altogether? Like, we have so many bureaucrats inside the Pentagon who basically think that our current president is a tyrant, which he has proven again and again that he isn't. For example, I have mentioned this several times, but during COVID, he could have told the states that they're not allowed to shut down, that they're not allowed to control their own policies, that they would have to follow the regulations that he had put out for them. Not that any of them would have listened, but he had had a very hands-off approach to letting states control their own policies when it came to COVID, even if it was a detriment to trade. For example, one thing that California pushed was, it was unrelated to COVID, but they required that only trucks of a certain gas mileage would be allowed to enter in ports and pick up goods and transport it throughout the state and throughout the country. This meant that a lot of the trucks that exist inside the United States were not allowed to actually enter the ports in California, meaning that there were many, many ships throughout the state that were not being offloaded. They were being offloaded very slowly, or they were just sitting in dock for months and months at a time, not pushing out the goods that they were carrying, and they were driving up an artificial scarcity and driving up prices throughout the country. It got so bad that eventually these ships had finally cut through their contractual terms and were able to actually leave the ports in California and go through the Panama Canal to go to places like California, Florida, Louisiana, and states that were actually willing to take in the goods that they had been paid to transport. I just want to tell you just how absolutely insane that is. And the fact that the media never actually talked about it. And I mentioned this in, I think, yesterday's video on how the media hid every single controversy that Obama had gone through because they didn't want to be seen as racist for criticizing the first black president. Whereas the propaganda on Trump is so bad that it's driven a lot of people just outright insane, including a lot of my friends, people that I have known for a long, long time, people that I really care about. It has gone just completely and utterly mad with how much like these organizations have been subverted by a group of people who believe that they're the only voices that actually matter. The fact that we are in such a position is absolutely terrifying and something that we should all be concerned with. But according to Democrats, this is the natural order of things, that one party should control all speech inside the country. Now that hasn't worked because all these media organizations are completely not trusted anymore. In fact, there was a study that came out a few years ago from many, I think it was 46 Western countries, and what the people of those countries thought of the media and how much they trusted the media. Out of 46 Western countries, United States citizens trusted the media the least. And this all started around the time of Bill Clinton, I would say. But I would even go even further. While a lot of things going on during Bill Clinton's time was pretty bad, I would say it even started all the way back during the Nixon times. Now, I wouldn't say that like what Nixon was doing, hiding a crime, covering up what was going on at the Watergate, was a good idea, but it seemed to me that the CIA and the FBI were involved in helping with the cover up, and they were actually trying to overthrow or make things very hard for their boss because they didn't like Nixon very well. Because Nixon, well, a relatively paranoid guy, and he didn't trust his intelligence organizations. I wonder why. It's not like intelligence organizations had been known for experimenting on American citizens against their will or anything, or without their knowledge. Yeah, I mean, but, anyways, it seemed like it was partially a setup, and Nixon could have done a lot more to get out of the trap that was laid for him, and it was his own fault for falling for it and actually trying to cover up a situation that he should have been he should have just come out and admitted to the public. But it seems since those days when the media actually found the whole situation out and had thrown Nixon under the bus, that the media has gotten this giant head that they're the ones who control what people say or do or think, because they're the ones who spread the information, they're the ones who inform the public. Basically, they became the fourth estate. Now, if you've never heard that term before, the fourth estate refers to specifically the days of the French Revolution, where there were three classes of people: the clergy, the nobility, and basically the plebeians, the civilians, the people. And each estate had equal power, despite the fact that the clergy and the nobility made up a small fraction of a percent of the people of France. It got to the point where the people, the third estate, as it was called, started to take matters into their own hands and took over all Paris. Now, there were many people outside of Paris who actually loved their nobility because their nobility actually took care of them and didn't tax them that much, knowing that they made plenty of profits through their agricultural goods, and that taxing them too much would simply destroy the economy in those local rural areas. And there were a lot of people who, loved their clergymen because their clergymen were not involved in major city politics and therefore were less likely to be corrupt, for example. We call Now, we don't have nobility or a class of clergymen that run stuff in the United States. We have our elected class, we have our bureaucrats, and then we have the people who are supposed to be representative and supposed to be informed. And then the fourth estate would be considered the media in our case. And the fourth estate has been lying to us for a long time, or have been subverting, not telling us about certain things and over exaggerating other things. Basically turning into a propaganda arm. And whether or not you think that a lot of this propaganda is for the left or the right, a lot of it is for the left, just so you know, but there is propaganda for the right as well. You have to remember that it is completely and utterly unfair to the people and to our families and to our loved ones when we're being told something that just flat out isn't true or a complete exaggeration without any regards to what the other side is saying. it is completely disgusting to me just what has happened to our society. It's not so much that I believe that we have fallen and that it is unrecoverable, but or that one side is evil while the other side is good. There is evil on both sides. And at the same time, I don't always believe in the idea of a uniparty. There are situations where cooperation and actually voting with your opponents on something that you agree with is not a bad thing. Now, there are times where both parties voting for one thing is a bad thing. For example, voting for them to give more funding to, say, the military industrial complex. And then they go out, whether or not we need that money for defense, and whether that money is all going to what it's supposed to. If it all goes to where it's supposed to, and that stuff is actually vital for defense, that's one thing. But when these congressmen vote in this stuff, they then start to trade stocks in the companies that they know is about to get a giant government grant. Basically, they're engaging in insider trading and making a huge profit off the taxpayers by doing that, because the money doesn't just materialize out of nowhere. It comes from the people. They are taking our money by doing that. By engaging in insider trading, they are, well, they are causing the money to come from us because we are investing money into those stocks, and when those stocks start to fall, we may pull out of the stocks, and then suddenly they push a bill that gives a whole bunch of resources from our taxpayer money to those organizations, and suddenly those stocks rise really high. And they get all the profit from that while we get all the losses from both having sold the stocks early or from the fact that they're taking our taxpayer money and funneling it into that company and then taking the money out of the stock and putting it in their pockets. That the profits they are getting comes from our taxpayer money. And it's not like we have any option on whether or not our money goes into that company. They're the ones who are supposed to be representing us. They're the ones putting our money into that company, and they're the ones taking money out of that company via selling off the stocks after they had bought it all up just before they passed a bill. They're getting rich off of us. And they keep talking about how we should ban that kind of insider trading, and yet neither party seems very willing to do it because, well, they're the ones profiting off of it. This is one of those situations where I think that we should have a direct democracy for those specific kinds of issues. Like if the people should be able to vote on how much congressmen are paid. Congressmen should not be able to vote on how much they are paid. That is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying that we should be able to vote on them only earning like $1 a year or something like that, or earning minimum wage. It should be something, there should be some kind of checks and balances on it, but we should be able to stop them from investing in stocks. We shouldn't have to rely on Congress to vote on them being able to invest in stocks or not. It's absolutely ridiculous that we allow them to do that kind of crap. Now, we did push an amendment that was originally proposed back at the founding of the nation that specifically said that if Congress votes on a pay raise for themselves, that the pay raise won't go through until after the next election for Congress. That was a specific amendment to the Constitution that never got passed, and some college student had eventually realized it. I believe it was a college student, and pushed states to actually ratify that amendment centuries after the fact. And eventually it was ratified, and that was one way to cut down on corruption. But it's just not enough. Anyways, back to censorship. It's just, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of certain voices not being elevated. If you have somebody who's insane or pushing some kind of conspiracy or pushing some kind of falsehood, you should be able to argue against it and use facts and logic to destroy that person's argument. But that's not what people do. When people have a good, solid argument based on facts and logic, a lot of times that their opinions and their beliefs and their points are suppressed because the facts do hurt the current establishment. And the fact that this is allowed to happen is an completely utter disgrace to what this country is supposed to stand for, whereas other organizations are allowed to push outright falsehoods without any consequences whatsoever. When they push, like the Russian collusion hoax, for example, what happened to the main person who pushed it? Shifty Shift. You know. The senator, the now current senator of California, well, he got promoted. And this is despite the fact that his main residence isn't even on the West Coast. It's not even in California. It's like in Maryland, on the other side of the country. And yet he's allowed to represent this state despite the fact that he doesn't even live in the state. His main residence is on the East Coast. Basically as far away from California as it's possible to get and still be in living in America. It's absolutely insane that he was allowed to get promoted like that and not suffer any consequences, despite the fact that he obviously knew that the Russian collusion theory was an absolute hoax pushed by propaganda that was paid for by Hillary Clinton and bought off of a literal Russian agent. I want to really hammer home just how insane that situation is, by the way. Hillary Clinton bought information from a Russian agent that was proven false, and the media ran with this for years, saying that Trump is controlled by Russia, despite the fact that Hillary was using Russian propaganda to attack her political opponent. But Trump is the Russian agent, not Hillary. Despite the fact that Trump is the only president in decades who did not have a major invasion happen underneath him. Russia invaded its neighbors under Bush. Russia invaded its neighbors under Obama. Russia invaded its neighbors under Biden. Russia invaded Afghanistan, I think, under Reagan or Bush Sr. I don't remember. Basically, Russia has been abusing its neighbors for basically every president, not all of them, except for Trump, because Trump is the only one that actually could scare them to not invade its neighbors. But somehow that is even twisted as just more evidence that Trump is being controlled by Russia. The fact that Russia can't just steal land from its neighbors while Trump is in office is somehow proof that Trump is a Russian agent. It's absolutely ridiculous. What has been going on inside of America is absolutely disgusting, and it needs to stop. The fact that Trump is winning this much, I'm not even like a full-on conservative, really. I have a lot of liberal views in some areas, but I find the control of one party on information to be absolutely an abhorrent idea. And the fact that Trump has been able to push against propaganda and completely bypass censorship is one of the most amazing things I think has ever happened to this country. And I support him 100%. Or, well, not 100%. There are things that I don't like, or that I don't really have, or I don't really support, or I'm iffy about. And that's the thing. I'm allowed to criticize Trump. I'm allowed to say that I don't like him doing this, or I don't like people on the right or Republicans doing this. But if someone on the left tries to say something negative about Democrats, oftentimes their voice is shunted out of the conversation entirely. It's just, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. But, well, that's all I gotta say about that. I had to make a video, and I wanted to talk about one of the most frustrating things about being an American. I know other countries have worse censorship, and sometimes they even have worse propaganda, but God, I honestly can't imagine the propaganda getting worse inside this country. It's been so bad for the last 10, 20, 30 years. God only knows, man. I was so young 30 years ago that I would not, like, if you were to put me back in the 1990s to listen to the media back then, there were probably things that I would notice that they lied about that obviously I wouldn't have figured out when I was that young. I mean, God. But anyways, before I start rambling again, that's all, guys. Shorter video today, so have a good night. Or have a good day, I suppose, when this comes out in the morning.